Hi and welcome to a demonstration of how to install Kafka on AWS. I'm going to show you how to configure Kafka such that you can consume directly from the command line from a file and a database, and then at the end I'm actually going to show you how to set it up such that you can consume and produce from SnapLogic as well. So first of all, I'm going to go right from basics. I'm actually going to launch an instance on AWS. So let's do that. So Amazon Linux instance, it needs to be at least a T2 small, so remember that one. I'm going to configure the security groups, so let's add a few there. So the first one is HTTP. The next one is MySQL, because the database that I'm going to use is a MySQL database. And finally, custom TCP, which is the Kafka port, which I'm going to open as well. So anywhere, I'm going to launch that up. I'm going to use an existing key pair, which is I've got already, but you may need to create one. So now, if we go to instances, you can see that's starting up. And if we just call that em Kafka new, then it just helps us to remember where we are. You can actually see that the IP address has already been assigned. So if we open up PuTTY and just load that one up and just change that and just call that Kafka new and save, then we've got a record of that in terms of SSH. And as soon as that initializes, then we'll open up the SSH windows and start configuring. Okay, so you can see that the instance is now up and running. So that's let's move that across now and open up our PuTTY windows. So let's do an open on there. Let's move that across, make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so EC2 user. Cool. Okay, so now what we're going to do is quickly update the machine by doing a yum update on that machine. So that's going to just quickly make sure that the machine is nice and clean in terms of its updates. It just takes a second. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go ahead and quickly install a LAMP server on that machine, which includes MySQL. Okay, cool. Now we're going to do the MySQL install as well. So if we just start the machine first of all and then run through the installation very quickly. I'm going to set a password. You'll need this later. Okay, let's just make sure I did that right because I'm not convinced. Okay, I did. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a database on my MySQL very quickly. And this is the one that I'm going to read from eventually. And also I'm going to grant access to that database from my home PC such that I can run Mysql Workbench. So that's that now. So let's come out of there, MySQL, and if we go to Mysql Workbench here, I'm going to create a new connection. Let's call it AWS Kafka new, and give it the IP address of my machine, and that was that. Okay, test connection. So fingers crossed. Right, test connection there, it's worked. So I do OK, and you can see Kafka new. Now what you should hopefully see there is my database, and I'm going to set that as default schema, and I'm just going to quickly create a table on that database called persons. So if we do that and we do that, then it's not worked. So let's check that. I just had a typo in my create statement, so I corrected it, and when I run that, it's worked. So now if I just pull that down and do a refresh on that table, then you can see the persons table is there. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we're ready to do the Caf Core install. Okay, so if we go to Google and do download, actually do Apache Kafka downloads, and you can see that there's the Scala 2.11. So if we just click on that, and you'll see that this is the download URL. So if we go back to here and do pwd, that this is my home directory. So let's do a wget and just bring that down in terms of bringing down Kafka from the site. So hopefully that should take a second, but that should download Kafka. So you can see that Kafka's, if I do an ls-al on there, spell it correctly, then Kafka's been brought down. So what I'm going to do now is copy that Kafka to the /op directory. So I'm going to need to do sudos everywhere. So copy Okay, so now if you go to /opt, it's going to be there. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is unpack it. So if we go to pwd, yep, and if we do a tar, I think it's -xp zf on the Kafka. That's cool. Or actually we're going to need to do a sudo. Okay, that should have pulled everything down that we need. So if we just quickly go to the Kafka directory and just do an ls-al, just want to have a quick look that everything's there. So bin. Okay, and then also config. This is an important directory as well. Okay, so cool. So now in the config directory, there's a couple of changes that we need to make. So if we do a vi, and you can use the editor of your choice, but I like vi. Oh, actually, we don't have to do the sudo on there because it's in our directory. So if we do vi server properties, then what you'll see is that there's a couple of changes that we need to make to this. So if we just quickly here on the URL, we need to change that to the AWS IP address. So if I've not closed that, yep, there we go. If you go back to here, and you go to here and just do copy that IP address to the clipboard, and if I paste that in there, and also do the same for that, and paste that in there, and save that off, then I believe that's the extent of the changes that we need to make. So what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to open up a couple of new windows, and you'll see why in a second. Because I want to create a producer and a consumer for that Kafka, so that you can actually see those messages coming in. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a topic. So let's make this one the producer, this one the consumer. So if we now go to the /opt /Kafka /bin directory, and just check that that's the right one. And if we run this command, which is Kafka topics create, and I'm going to create a topic called connect test. If we run that, and before I create the topic, one thing I did forget to do is that I'm going to actually have to start Zookeeper and Kafka. So if I go back to here and go to the bin directory, so let's kick off Zookeeper first and then Kafka. So let's do that. That should kicked off Zookeeper, and I did it with an ampersand, so it's kicked it off as a background activity. Let's do the same there as well. So kick off Kafka, and that's kicked off Kafka as well. Okay, so now that should be sorted. So now let's go back to the topic and let's create the topic again. And you can see that topic's been created that time. Now, like I promised, let's get rid of that. And let's create the producer here and then the consumer here. So let's kick off a producer. That's in the bin directory, so that's the right one. So producer there on the connect test, and the consumer here on the lower screen there. Okay, and I'm probably in the wrong directory, so let's go to opt Kafka bin and try that again. There we go. That's produced. That's doing the consumer. So now if I do test message 1 from the producer, then you can actually see that the messages are coming out below on the consumer. So that's basically got the command line Kafka working. So test message 1, test message 2, they're coming out on here. So that's the first step. So the next bit is to actually get the files, being able to consume additions to a file. So you can append. So what we're going to do is going to append some text to a file and see if we can consume that from from Kafka. Okay, so let's kick off another window just to get this configuration done on the file as well. So let's do EC2 user. Okay, so for this, if you go to the /opt directory, Kafka, and then config, then a couple of config changes that we have to make here. So on here, there's a couple of files that we need to change. So if we do a sudo vi file sync properties, let's change that one first, and let's change that to, I just want to put it to temp, so text, cool, it's the only change there. And also we need to make a change to source as well. So let's change that one as well while we're here. And I'm just going to put that to tmp. Okay, so I'm going to create a file in /temp called test.txt, and I'm going to need a sudo there. Okay, and if we also do a chmod 777 on that should allow us to write to it later as well. Okay, there's one other change that we have to do in here, which is one that I normally forget, but remembered this time. So if you go to standalone properties there, actually I haven't opened it correctly, so let me try that again. And the local host here has to change to the full AWS name. So let's go back to there, copy that, and if we just do an insert there. So now what we've done is configured it such that it's ready to consume from a file as well, I believe. But before we do that, we just need to stop and start the server. So I'm just going to kill these consumers, so and the producer there, and I'm also going to, if I'm in the bin directory there, so if I just do a ls-al on that, and let's kill Kafka. So if we do a stop server on Kafka, where's it gone? There we go. Okay, stop server on Kafka. Okay, that's one done, and then also Zookeeper as well. So Zookeeper. Okay, so that's done as well. And if we do a ps-ef grep Kafka, just to be sure, see that's nothing there, and also Zookeeper. Okay, there's nothing there as well, so that's good. So now, because we've made those changes, and just let me check, I have. Okay, so now if we just start up the server again, so I'm just going to get the commands that I had in there originally. So Zookeeper first. Okay, that's that. Okay, and then also Kafka. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to here and start my producer again. And also my consumer. I'm just going to check that this is still working. So test message free. Yep, test message 4. So that's working. Okay, so that's cool. So it's still working. Everything's in place. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to connect standalone. So one further thing that we have to do is that there's a file in here which is called connect standalone. So it's this file up here, and we've configured it with the standalone properties to actually kick off the file reader. So we're going to kick it off with this command. So let's have a quick look at the command before we do that. Sorry, it's not the command. This one should be. So it's going to be started in the background, connect standalone with the connect standalone properties file, and it's going to use the connect file source properties. Okay, so let's give that a go. Okay, that's that. So now if we go to the temp.txt file, okay, so if we from here go to the /temp directory, and you can see that test.txt file is there. So what we're going to do is just append a message to the test.txt file, and you can see on the right hand side that that message that we've appended to that file has now been consumed by Kafka on the right hand side. So you can just see that working once more. So test messages 5, 6, 7 have come out in Kafka. So now what we've done is configured it such that we are now consuming messages which have been added to a file. So that's cool. So our next step is to actually get the database working. So what the kind of consumption of Kafka messages from additions to a database. That's the next step. So what we're going to do is kill the standalone process for file, because we're going to create one for a database. So now if we go to the top window, just do a ps -ef grep on let's just do standalone just to find the process number, and let's do a sudo kill -9 on those process IDs. Okay, so let's do that again, and you can see that standalone connector is not running anymore. That's cool. So now what we need to do in here is, if we go to the config directory, we need to create a file. So sorry, config directory. We need to create a file in here, and that file is going to be called. It's a JDBC connect properties file. So let's just copy that and put that there. Okay. Actually, I'm not sure I created it. So let's do sudo. Okay, and now in here I'm going to copy this in here, and I'll explain it in a second. So what this is doing is that it is basically a properties file which is going to hook up to my Kafka database, which is running on there. And you remember that test database that we created earlier? It's got the credentials to access that database. It's got the table to look at, so you can actually, with these properties, you can actually whitelist a table or blacklist a table. I've chosen to whitelist a person's table. I can actually have an incrementing mode. So one thing that you may have noticed from my table here, that I created it with auto increment. So it's a field that's auto incrementing. So that's the field that it's actually using to trigger an update. So auto incrementing, and it gives you the column name, which is person ID. It's got a plugins path here, and also it's got the topic prefix. So when it creates the topic to look at, it's going to prefix JDBC underscore. So the topic that we're going to look at when we consume messages is actually going to be JDBC underscore persons, which is the name of the table. And that will become clear as we kind of go through. So let's save that off, such that that file is now there. Okay, so you can see the JDBC properties file is now there. Now in the libs directory, there's a couple of files that we need to drag down. So this is the libs directory. Now in here, we need to put a couple of files, which are, one is the MySQL driver, and then one is the actual Kafka Connect JDBC jar. And what you'll see is that both of them need to be put in the libs directory. So these are available on the Confluent Kafka site, and also the but let's actually take you to that site now. Let's see if I've got that open. So if I go back to here and do download Confluent Kafka, yeah, that's the one. So if I go to here and if I download this file here, then it's going to bring down a zip for me, and the MySQL driver as well. That's just on the MySQL site. But if I open this up, you'll see the downloads directory here, and you'll see that the Confluent has been downloaded and it's been unzipped, and the file that you need is in the Confluent share Java connect JDBC, and it's this jar that you need, this one here, the Kafka connect JDBC. And the other jar that you need is in the connector, and it's this one, these two jars. Now what I've done is that I have uploaded those two jar files to my website, and therefore I can do a wget from my website. So if I now do, and you can actually see what I'm going to do now. So I've got, this is my libs directory here. So if I now do a wget, copy that command here. Let's see if this works. Okay, and it's not worked. Add a space in my command, so let's take that out. Okay, and yeah, let's do the sudo. Yeah, that saved that time. So now let's just change that and also pull down the Kafka jar. So now if I go to that directory, you'll see that there's a Kafka Connect JDBC and also the MySQL bin file as well. So that's a bin jar as well. So that's another job done. So now what we're going to do is that if we go to the logs directory, we're actually going to create a log file in here called Kafka underscore JDBC underscore log. Okay, and let's just give it the right. Okay, so in here now we've got a log file as well, and that's going to be written to when we actually start the process, such that we can keep an eye on what's happening in there just in case there's any errors. Okay, so now what we've got to do now is actually start up the standalone process. So you know, like how we started up the standalone process for a file, so now we need to start up the standalone process for the database. So now if we go to the bin directory and let's give this a go. So here you'll see that you're doing the standalone again with the standalone properties, but this time you're doing it with the JDBC properties file rather than the file source properties file. So if you give that a go, okay, so it's giving us a permission denied error on that. So the permission denied error went away when I gave the directory, the logs directory, permissions to be accessed. So now if I go back to the logs directory, just want to see what the logs look like. There we go. I think I may have spelled the name of the logs wrong, that's why it gave the issue. But if anyway, not to worry. If I now just get rid of that log file which was spelled incorrectly, and also have a look at this log file. do a Control G, and then there's no errors in that log file, which is good news. Okay, so now if I go back up here, then the Kafka standalone has been running. Now we need to actually create a consumer which is looking at the new topic, because the topic is now called JDBC underscore persons. So if we just do a right click on here and do Kafka new, so this is a consumer which is looking at the JDBC persons topic. Okay, so let's go to /opt/Kafka/bin, and let's steal the command from here. Sorry, here. But this time, let's look at the JDBC underscore persons. So JDBC underscore persons. Okay, so let's look there. Cross our fingers, and hopefully that should do it. Okay, so there's an error there, but let's see if that still works. So now if we go back to this table, so this was the Mysql Workbench, and what I want to do is that I want to add some data into here. So if we just add some data into that table with an insert command, and just add some data into there, then you can actually see that that data has appeared there. So let's just change that to Rubble and Barney, and let's change the address to 125, and you can see that data is appearing there. So now what we've done is that we've configured Kafka such that it's now reading from a MySQL database. And very similarly, if you wanted to connect to another JDBC data source, say Oracle, you just need to put the right jar in that directory, in the libs directory, and configure accordingly, and now you can actually consume data from an Oracle database, which is pretty neat. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is we want to just hook up SnapLogic such that you can consume messages from SnapLogic and also produce them on SnapLogic as well. So let's open up SnapLogic there. And we can configure as well, such that I'll show you how to configure a Kafka account on SnapLogic. So we've got our pipeline here. If we just go to Kafka, and let's do a consumer first. So let's consume the messages from that database. Let's create an account, and let's call it Kafka new. The bootstrap server is going to be that. Copy that, paste it there, do 1992, and let's just validate that. Okay, that's going to fail actually. Should be not. Okay, that should pass. Okay, so now do apply on that. So now let's configure this and let's look at it for a topic. So let's look at the JDBC persons topic first. Just going to put some random group ID there. Let's do message count 0, and I'm going to look at the beginning, the earliest messages. Now if we do an execute preview on that, then we should be able to see the Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble messages that we sent into that JDBC topic here. So now that's validated. So now if we go back to here and do the expand all, and you can see there's two messages, one of them Fred Flintstone and one of them Barney Rubble. So that's coming through there. So let's get rid of that because the consumer is now working. So now let's do a producer. Let's produce some messages. Let's put a mapper in front of there as well. Cool. Let's say this is a message from SnapLogic, and let's call that message value. Okay. Save that off. Let's configure that. So let's look at the account. It's going to be Kafka New, so that one's done. So the topic I want to produce on is, I'm going to go back to connect test just to show you something different. Just going to send without acknowledgement the message value. So let's pick that parameter that we sent in, message value, and then execute during preview. If we now go back to here, which is the connect test one, and you can hopefully see that that message came through there. So just to show you that I wasn't making that up, we change that to this is a message. This is another message from SnapLogic. So we save that and close that really quickly, and then go back to here. So that's validating. You'll see that then another message from SnapLogic. So SnapLogic's been able to consume messages and also produce them. Hopefully that gives you a good overview. If you need any more information or you need kind of written instructions on how to do any of the above, then come back to me. Thanks a lot now. Bye.